humanity still kind of did build it. At the peak of
No, they didn't. Today we're going to be looking at another one of Kurzgesagt's videos, specifically Project Sundial. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tyler Fultz. I'm a nuclear engineer with a little over 10 years of experience in the commercial nuclear power industry, from engineering to operations to emergency response. I don't claim to know everything there is nuclear, but I can certainly share some knowledge. Let's see what this craziness is. And we're starting off with the U.S. nuclear weapons facility. That's always a good start.
In the 1950s, the US began the top-secret project Sundial. Most of it is still classified. The goal, a single nuclear bomb so powerful it would destroy all of human civilization. Conceived in...
Why? Just why? It's stuff like this that makes nuclear engineers, well, look like this guy.
Old logic from the mind of a genius scientist. Sundial had the energy equivalent of 10 billion tons of TNT. A pyramid of explosive...
So 10 billion, that's 10 gigatons. So that's pretty big. That's 100 times more powerful than the most powerful untested nuclear weapon, Tsar-Bomba. The tested version was at 50 megatons. And the reason behind that is 100 megatons would have been too dangerous for the bombing crew to get to safe distance. Not to mention, this is significantly more powerful than all of today's nuclear weapons combined.
13 times taller than the actual Great Pyramid. 3,000 more than all the bombs dropped during World War II.
Oh, wow.
If you dropped the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima every minute, it would take you over 15 months to match Sundial. How was it even possible for us to
continuous fire, belt-fed nukes, really?
achieve this insane level of madness?
So keep in mind the entire world's nuclear arsenal is estimated to be around 4,000 megatons or 4 gigatons. So this is way bigger than that, and it's just one. They're showing multiple in this image.
Everything is different forever. Let's set the stage. If you were 40 in 1945, that means you were born in 1905. Back then, monarchs ruled over much of the world. Only 3% of homes in the US had electricity, cities were dominated by buses, the first experimental planes had just flown. Less than 100,000 soldiers died in war each year. Imagine growing up in this world and seeing change almost too fast to keep up with. By 1945, 24 million soldiers and 50 million civilians had died in 2 world wars. And suddenly, there were TVs, microwaves, jet planes, and nuclear bombs. They kind of broke the brains of the people alive back then. Overnight, nowhere from...
Interesting, nuke refers to a nuclear bomb as a noun, but as a verb, I often hear nuke more commonly with a microwave. So I guess that's one thing they have in common.
Edge of space to the bottom of the ocean was safe. It's hard for us today to understand the level of terror this instilled in people. The implications were wild. Without nuclear...
People are afraid of everything, just like a lot of people are afraid of AI now, where, I don't know, I see it as just another tool with upside and downside, just like any other tool that has existed since 1905 or earlier, really.
weapons, it seemed you'd stand no chance in future conflicts. Nations without that power would get trampled by those that did have it, no matter how big their armies were. There was one brief moment where it could all have been stopped. In 1946,
the other side being there's a deterrent to having nuclear weapons, that everyone's afraid to use them, so they're afraid to go to war. I don't think that's a good reason to keep them around, but that's just my opinion.
The US proposed the Baruch Plan and promised to get rid of their atom bombs, share nuclear technology with the world, and set up an international authority to make sure no one ever built such weapons again. But the military advantage of nuclear bombs was too great to let go. Just 3 years later, the Soviet Union detonated their first atom bomb. This caught everyone by complete surprise. The Soviets were not decades behind American technology, but had just pulled even. Shock turned into fear, and fear makes people do crazy things. The whole concept of what war was and how it would be won was overturned in a hot second. In a world where your enemy could fly over your soldiers and vaporize your cities, the only answer seemed to be a nuclear arsenal that could strike faster and harder.
Or just the ability to shoot them down. I mean, that's... you could use it defensively.
The arms race began. In 1946, there were just 9 nuclear bombs in the world. In 1950, the number was 300.
What's interesting is to make Little Boy used well over 90% of the world's supply of uranium-235. And really the message there is there just wasn't that much uranium-235 because you don't see that much of it naturally. It's way less than 1% of natural uranium despite it doing all of the work, basically causing all of the fissions. Uranium-238 can fission, but it requires very specific conditions with fast neutrons. The point is, yeah, it's rapidly new technology that a lot of people invested in very quickly.
In 1960, it would be 20,000. In a way, the nuclear arms race was...
Those 4 gigatons I mentioned earlier were spread out across about 12,000 now.
daft. One superpower would develop a powerful new bomb and detonate it, and then the other side would build something more powerful and blow it up, and this would continue endlessly. A dirty and wasteful game of creating more and more horror that seemed totally reasonable at the time. Superpowers spent trillions.
It's entertaining. That was also the time period where individual weapons had a lot more yield. Nowadays, most nuclear weapons on the order of 200 to 400 kilotons, and those are the bigger ones. But in the 50s and 60s, yeah, you had multi-megaton, 10 megatons, 15 megatons. The Tsar Bomba, the tested version at 50 megatons.
Thousands of the most intelligent people show off how hard they could destroy humanity. Fear had to be met with much greater horrors, and one man knew how to make nightmares real. But what if we destroy humanity even harder? Edward Teller was a brilliant Hungarian theoretical physicist. He was among the first people to realize that the fission chain reaction in uranium could make a bomb, and he helped to build it. But for Teller, the bombs were not
It can also safely generate electricity for billions of people, but that's the side of fission that I enjoy, but to each their own, I suppose.
Enough. He was ready to pay any price for security, and to be more secure, to be less afraid, he urged that larger bombs were the answer. Even in the 1950s,
I like the phrasing of this, talking about how big of a nuclear bomb do you need to compensate for your insecurities? Let me know down in the comments what's acceptable.
this was a pretty hot take, and many scientists were appalled by his ideas. He didn't care one bit, and incessantly lobbied scared politicians to greenlight more devastating nuclear weapons. And lucky for him, his timing was just right. Terrified by the rapid nuclear progress of the Soviet Union, he got a blank check from the military to bring his most destructive fantasy to life. It took him only a few years to make them a reality: the hydrogen bomb. A hydrogen bomb is so powerful that it needs a regular atom bomb just to trigger it. It's basically a nuke, the first stage next to a capsule of fusion fuel, the second stage encased by dense materials like lead. When the atom bomb is detonated, it releases ungodly amounts of X-rays that get channeled onto the capsule. The capsule's surface explodes, pushing inwards and compressing the fusion fuel so violently that for a brief moment it simulates a star. When this bomb was first tested in
So that whole process happens in a fraction of a second. Both the fission reaction and the fusion reaction happen on the order of a few shakes. A shake is a term from the Manhattan Project that is 10 nanoseconds. So to achieve fusion, you need high temperature, high pressure, and confinement time. This confined fission bomb creates so much temperature and so much pressure that confinement time is pretty dang small. So enough conditions for fusion, which allows even more energy to be released. And that's why the World War II era nuclear weapons were on the order of 15 kilotons, and these hydrogen bombs were much more powerful. And in this time period, we're talking 15 megatons. Not at all out of the question. And that was the philosophy: bigger individual nuclear weapons. That changes over time. It eventually got into multiple warheads, splitting the MIRVs, multiple independently targeted re-entry vehicles, where you use smaller nukes, but more of them. That was the next era after this, but in this time period, the 50s and 60s, just really big fusion weapons.
1952, it instantly erased a Pacific island from the map. 2 years later, he tested an even bigger nuke, 1,000 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. The world recoiled in horror. With weapons this powerful, war stopped being about winning.
Interesting note on some of those tests. They underestimated how powerful the weapons were, to the point where they caused a lot of unnecessary or unaccounted for contamination as well as burns and damage to the environment. It's one thing to make these things, but it's another thing to make these and not be 100% sure how powerful they are. It's ridiculous.
Total human annihilation became very real. Teller celebrated.
No. There just never were that many. Though, I guess I could see how you could think you were going that path after seeing the exponential rise in nukes that, hey, the fear of that certainly existed, that, hey, if we build even more of these, then yeah, we could cause even more destruction.
In just 2 years, he'd have American warheads 100 times more powerful. He had stolen the nuclear fire from the gods and awoken cosmic horrors, but he insisted that it was still not enough. His dream was to have a bomb of almost unlimited power. And once again, his
Emperor Palpatine
timing was pretty great. When the Soviet Union detonated its own hydrogen bomb, it sparked a new wave of fear. This is where we get the top-secret Project Sundial, the bomb to make all other bombs irrelevant. The final bomb. Teller skipped right to the end of the nuclear arms race. He wanted to build a world destroyer, something so breathtakingly destructive.
Yeah, he's Emperor Palpatine. He's making the Death Star.
So incredibly scary that it made no sense to continue playing. Almost everything about it is still classified, but what we do know about it is terrifying. Work on it actually began, and tests were planned. Sundial wouldn't be some warhead loaded up onto a bomber and dropped on a target. No,
Okay, so they're clearly going to be taking a lot of creative liberties here. And since a lot of it is classified unknown, there might be a lot of chicanery in this next segment, so I'm preparing myself.
A backyard bomb. After all, if a bomb can destroy the world, why bother moving it at all? No need to bring it close to your enemies, you could as well just put it in your backyard. Maybe it would have actually been put in the center of the country, maybe it
Open nukes, like OpenAI?
put on a remote island or stored on a ship. We don't know what the actual plans were. But this underlines how insane this weapon was and that Teller knew exactly what he was proposing. In his mind, the rationale was the ultimate deterrence. If you attack us or our allies, we will destroy the world.
He must have been a riot at board games. He was that guy that flipped over the table.
On a technical level, his concept was not even that complicated. It was probably some kind of nuclear matryoshka doll. The truly breathtaking thing is the idea itself.
Okay, by nuclear matryoshka doll, so the idea that you could keep increasing the power of a weapon by layering it with more and more booster stages, just like what was described in having the fission stage and the fusion stage. Yeah, you could, I guess, continually layer it. I mean, there's a lot of practical considerations, such as the size and weight of the fissile material. Obviously, delivery systems, but I guess in this specific example, we're ruling that out since this is just the kill everyone, sore loser bomb. And you could get your hundreds of megatons, even gigaton level, maybe even 10 gigatons, though to get to there, you're not keeping this classified. You are not keeping this a secret because it would require vast amounts of fusion fuel, the deuterium and tritium, that you would need to synthesize so much of that. It would require trillions and trillions of dollars. You would also have to very precisely engineer it because it can only go off and achieve its maximum desired goal of maximum destructive power a very specific way. The ignition sequence would get that much more intricate when you scale it up to this monstrosity. With unlimited fuel and staging, yeah, you can get into the gigaton range, but no, it's just not practical. Practical, I think they got there when they did the Tsar Bomba, and the Tsar Bomba itself isn't practical when they got it up to 100 megatons.
And that he actually attempted to make it real. From what we know, Sundial would have weighed at least 2,000 tons, as massive as a 250-meter-long cargo train. It would explode with the power of at least 10 billion tons of TNT.
Okay, so 10...
So big, it doesn't mean anything anymore. So let's make this a bit...
I mean, it does. There's a pretty big difference between 10 gigatons and 100 gigatons.
graphic, and exploded in Nevada. One wild thing about it is that humanity never tested anything remotely like it, so this is the best speculation we developed together with experts.
So, the nuke map simulation that I'm familiar with that is pretty accurate, they don't go above 100 megatons for reasons that I described earlier.
For a brief moment, a fireball of pure energy appears, up to 50 kilometers in diameter, larger than the visible horizon. It radiates blistering heat at the speed of light. Everything within 400 kilometers is instantly set on fire. Every tree, house, person. The energy would reach...
So they're clearly, in modeling this, they're clearly extrapolating using the models for current nuclear weapons. So this is a surface detonation. So this amount, assuming they're using similar extrapolations from actual nuclear blasts, is going to be less than that of an airburst. Now, what it's going to do more is it's going to cause more contamination, but it's going to be, the amount of area that's going to be vaporized, whether it's contaminated or not, is going to be irrelevant.
Further, but the explosion is so big that the Earth's horizon curves away from it. The surrounding deserts turn into a field of glass. Then comes the blast wave. The atmosphere above the
Turning desert into glass happened during the Trinity test.
Is violently shot into space. A magnitude 9 earthquake shakes the United States, while the sound of the blast reverberates around the world. North American forests burn, adding their soot to the bomb's radioactive fallout to create toxic death clouds that shroud the world like a dark curtain.
Keep in mind, this is more powerful than setting off all the nuclear weapons in the world at once.
Is like a nuclear war happening all at once. But it's more like a giant volcano erupting or an asteroid striking.
It would. It's in one spot. Now, this is pretty powerful. This would be a really big volcano. Tambora was at least in the tens of megatons.
Nuclear war. Sundial would bring about an apocalyptic nuclear winter where global temperatures suddenly drop by 10 degrees Celsius. Most water sources would be contaminated and crops would fail everywhere. Most people...
This is speculative, so yeah, that's... If you compare that to the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs, that's like a sixth of that, so... It's going to cause the whole nuclear winter effect, which in other videos I've talked about it being overrated. Well, if you crank up the amount of nuclear firepower to beyond ridiculous levels, you can definitely get there.
...world would die. So, congratulations, you won. Good news. Wait, no.
Only winning move is not to play. War games reference?
News. The good news is that Sundial was never built. Most details are still top secret, but we know that scientists reacted with horror and politicians who were secretly informed responded with disbelief. Even the US military thought this was a bit much. In the insane world of nuclear arms, this madness was too much, building it considered a crime against humanity. And it had other problems too. A single apocalypse weapon leaves you no wiggle room. Would you press the button if enemy soldiers crossed a distant country?
Also, just the very idea of this. I mean, who would actually deploy this?
Borders or attacked one of your distant bases? Would you end the world if your rival overthrew a friendly government? Can you protect an ally with a bomb that would kill them too? The elephant in the room is that while Sundial is clearly insane, humanity still kind of did build it. At the peak of
No, they didn't.
Cold War, humanity had over 70,000 nukes. Even today, we still have about 12,000 nuclear weapons.
At its peak, at least the reference I'm familiar with, is 13,000 megatons dispersed, in that it's not one person having that much power concentrated. It's at least spread out between rival nations that haven't had a major war since. So there was at least some level of parity that could be achieved. There's a big difference between having it concentrated versus having it dispersed.
Enough to destroy human civilization. Instead of a single world, the superpowers built tens of thousands of nuclear weapons of all types and sizes, hidden in submarines or waiting in bunkers and silos. And this sounds so much more reasonable, doesn't it? But this also makes them a much more credible threat. Because if people feel they can risk setting off a smaller nuke, they might actually get launched. And we don't know what kind of chain reaction this might trigger.
That was one, I know, philosophy with the smaller tactical nukes, but then it's kind of at where do you draw the line before escalating it into a more serious conflict. Tactical nukes being significantly smaller than even the ones that were used during World War II, on the order of a kiloton, some even smaller than that.
So in reality, the difference between Sundial and what we have today is not even that big. Humanity...
I completely disagree with that. Feel free to show a differing opinion in the comments, but Having it concentrated like that makes all the difference. Spreading it out would create a less localized effect in terms of destruction, even if we assumed all these things went off. The nuclear winter effect would be considerably less severe, especially since I'm taking into account the difference in yield of these weapons. Not to mention the radiation damage from a surface detonation of something like that would be a lot more than the radiation effects from a bunch of standard airburst strikes. The fire damage would be much worse from this one attack because you're causing so many firestorms that are going to spread really throughout the entire Western Hemisphere at this point. Addition, the whole balance of power aspect. So, no, we're not in this scenario at all.
Didn't build a doomsday bomb, but a doomsday machine. Today, the world may be on the verge of another nuclear arms race. The US is on track to spend $1 trillion on nuclear modernization programs, while China is expanding its arsenal and might have more than 1,000.
Well, some of that's a lot of nuclear weapons are old and broke and need maintenance. A lot of them are pretty old.
Nuclear weapons ready to be deployed by 2030. So far, we've escaped the existential threat these weapons pose, but if an alien visited Earth, it might ask us if we're okay and need a hug.
I wasn't expecting that, but that's hilarious.
We should ask ourselves as a species if we really want to be ready to destroy ourselves at a moment's notice.
No. Yeah, let's just stick with peaceful uses of nuclear energy for safe, clean, reliable power for everyone. Thanks so much for the recommendation. And thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.